Jean-Bernard Fourtillan, hello. I'm very happy to see you again, 40 years after the work we did together.
I feel the same.
You've just made a fundamental discovery about the sleep-wake system. Can you tell us a little about it?
Well, in 1994, that's 21 years ago now, I discovered Valentonin, the sleep hormone, the true sleep hormone, under unique conditions. This hormone is secreted by the pineal gland during the night, between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's secreted by the pineal gland simultaneously with two other hormones, melatonin, a neuroprotective hormone. It was wrongly thought to be the sleep hormone.
So which protects neurons?
Which protects neurons. And a third hormone, 6-methoxyharmalan, discovered by McIsaac in 1961, the waking hormone. This hormone has psychostimulatory pharmacological properties of great intensity. It's as strong as LSD, an extremely powerful psychostimulant. These three hormones make up the sleep-wake system, which provides regulation of the psychological and autonomic states of the body.
It's a genuine scientific bombshell, this discovery.
Well, in fact, this sleep-wake system, which comprises three hormones secreted by the pineal gland, it's the endocrine function of the pineal gland, and it makes it possible to regard this endocrine gland as the leader of glands. The discovery of the sleep-wake system makes it possible to explain the mechanisms of neurological disorders, and it leads quite naturally to the treatment of these disorders. It can be said that, until now, these mechanisms have not been known, and so when the mechanisms of disorders are not known, it's difficult to find suitable drugs. And it can be said that until now, diseases whose mechanisms are not known have been treated with drugs whose modes of action are not known. Lucky finds, we could say.
Benzodiazepines.
For example, but also hypnotics, in particular benzodiazepinic compounds. Moreover, benzodiazepines and related drugs like zolpidem, Stilnox, zopiclone, Imovan, etc.
And these drugs can cause quite a hangover, right?
Yes, in particular for benzodiazepines and related drugs, which cause non-restorative anesthetic sleep and amnesia, with a great number of undesirable and crippling side effects, called paradoxical effects, because they're inexplicable.
What kind of lab animals did you work with?
Well, when the drugs are discovered, they are synthesized in small batches, and small animals are generally used because the products are in limited amounts. Rats or mice are the traditional choices. Unlike humans, rats are animals with diurnal sleep, but I wanted to work with animals with nocturnal sleep, like humans. So, in consultation with the experimenters, the model selected was chickens. These animals had been used in published articles, so they work very well, in particular in terms of enzymes, specifically acetyltransferase, which enables the synthesis of melatonin. So, working with chick pineal glands, that's 1 or 2 milligrams.
Very small, yes.
Yes, and to work to assay in biological fluids, coupled mass spectrometry is needed, or else it can't be done. And then for large animals, dogs were the natural choice, because electroencephalography can be carried out, more generally polysomnography, with electrooculagrams for paradoxal sleep, rapid eye movement, electrocardiograms and electromyograms can be recorded and studied.
The autonomic system.
Yes, the autonomic system. The dog is a perfect model, and all our studies of hypnotic effect were carried out in dogs.
Basically, do animals that sleep at night, like we do, function exactly the same way?
The sleep-wake system exists in higher vertebrates, and in particular in all mammals. But of course there are two categories. There are mammals with nocturnal sleep, like humans, dogs, chicks, as we saw earlier, and there are mammals with diurnal sleep, like predators.
The fox.
Right, an animal that seizes its prey as it sleeps. In all mammals, whether diurnal or nocturnal in terms of sleep, the hormones of the sleep-wake system are synthesized during the night, always between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
In the same way.
Yes, but obviously, in animals with nocturnal sleep, it's necessary that the pharmacokinetic properties of Valentonin are such that, during secretion, the concentrations of Valentonin in the body are prevalent, or higher than that of 6-methoxyharmalan. Then, when secretion ends, all the hormones are eliminated, and so the endocrine function is over. The pineal gland has finished its work. And at that moment, since Valentonin is eliminated very quickly, unlike 6-methoxyharmalan, 6-methoxyharmalan concentrations in a few minutes become higher than those of Valentonin and becomes prevalent.
And one wakes up.
And one wakes up, and this hormone maintains waking until 10 p.m. when it starts again.
Exactly, and the cycle repeats
There you
itself. It's very clear.
To have this extremely precise alternation of prevalence, the pharmacokinetic properties of mammals with nocturnal sleep, like humans and dogs, etc., must be exactly identical, or there could be no alternation at specific times. And conversely, how does that work in animals with diurnal sleep predators? Well, the pharmacokinetic properties are reversed, so that the prevalence is reversed.
It's very clear. Exactly, it's very clear. Then finally, it's in your research lab in Poitiers that you discovered this hormone, Valentonin. Where does this discovery come from? How did you manage to find something that would be revolutionary?
I think that several conditions were needed to make this discovery. A flash of insight, a revelation was needed first, and simultaneously it was necessary to have knowledge of fields as varied as chemistry — I'm a chemical engineer by training — pharmaceutical sciences — I'm a pharmacist. It was necessary to have knowledge of physiology, biochemistry, drug chemistry, called therapeutic chemistry — I'm a professor of therapeutic chemistry at the Poitiers School of Pharmacy — pharmacokinetics, bioanalysis. I had created a private bioanalysis laboratory in my research center, CIMAF.
So a doctor couldn't have all that. It's not possible.
No. And in clinical research, I had a private 24-bed clinic with doctors, nurses, and so on. So I had all the ingredients and all the knowledge that allowed me, after a flash of insight, to go to the end of the discovery and to pass from a first discovery of Valentonin, which I made in a few seconds, to the comprehension and definition of the sleep-wake system, which comprises 3 hormones. At the beginning of the 1990s, many researchers were interested in melatonin. This hormone, secreted by the pineal gland, as Lerner demonstrated in 1958, is secreted during the night. Light blocks its secretion, and it was very natural to think that melatonin was the sleep hormone. Having a private research center, I was interested in a method for assaying it, because this hormone is at very low concentrations. Secretions are very low, on the order of a few micrograms, and concentrations in the bloodstream are of the order of a few picograms or a few tens of picograms.
So how's it going to be measured?
Right. I'll point out that a picogram is 1/1000th of a milligram per milliliter of plasma. In our research center, CIMAF, we are the global leader in analysis techniques employing the coupling of gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. We developed a technique that still holds the world record for bioanalysis sensitivity. And to assay melatonin with such a technique, it has to be able to heat it to the gaseous state, since it's gas chromatography, a method for separating melatonin, and melatonin is not volatile at high temperature. To heat it to the gaseous state, it must be derivatized. That is, it must be transformed by grafting chemical elements such as perfluoroacyl groups.
Complicated, but feasible.
Exactly. The technique we developed consists in derivatizing melatonin using pentafluoropropionic acid anhydride, which makes it possible to bind perfluoroacyl COC2F5 groups to this nitrogen atom and the nearby carbon. An extraordinary reaction occurs at the end of the derivatization. A chemical reaction yields a tricyclic structure that is actually a beta-carboline, and in which we have a perfluoroacyl group. And since I knew that melatonin was obtained by acetylation of serotonin under the action of an enzyme, N-acetyltransferase, which makes it possible to bind an acetyl group to the nitrogen atom, I imagined that the body, obviously melatonin, could not react with perfluoroacyl groups, but that the enzymatic reaction continued, and that a new acetylation occurred under the action of N-acetyltransferase, which led to melatonin.
With the same enzyme?
With the same enzyme. And indeed, this compound we can see here, the derivative that can be heated to the gaseous state in order to perform gas chromatography and to couple it to a mass spec. Well, it's Valentonin, where COCH3 is replaced with a COC2F5 group. I imagined this in a few seconds, and I saw the Valentonin molecule.
The formula, right, basically this hormone is produced by the pineal gland in the center of our brain. It's also called the epiphysis, and Descartes said that it was the seat of the soul. But sleep-wake regulation, all that's fascinating. Basically, a true function is found in this gland.
So this gland, as will be seen, is the leader of glands, because it can be said that everything starts at 10 p.m. The 24-hour regulation of the body starts at 10 p.m. And the secretion of the three hormones by the pineal gland, in other words, the sleep-wake system, stops at 6 a.m. It lasts 8 hours, and at 6 a.m. the pineal gland can be said to finish its job. So it can be seen in the brain. It's a small endocrine gland located behind the thalamus. Furthermore, the closest endocrine gland is the pituitary gland, located in front of the hypothalamus.
Epiphysis, yes, in front.
And notice the proximity of the pineal gland to the eyes and to the retina, whose cells perceive light. And it will be seen that, finally, it's at the end of photoneuroendocrine tractus, which involves the suprachiasmatic nuclei, which are just above the optic chiasm. So it's the body's true biological clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It gives rhythm to the state of the body for 24 hours as a function of lifestyle and environment. And the rhythm set will be expressed or converted by the pineal gland into an endocrine hormone message via the secretion of the three hormones. It's what's called photoneuroendocrine transduction.
In other words, I close my eyes, it's night, there's no more light, I'm going to produce this Valentonin, and at the same time I notice that it's very close to the hippocampus, which is the region devoted to the memory. All that's connected with the limbic system, basically.
Yes, but if we close our eyes, if you close your eyes now, Valentonin will not be secreted. Indeed, the secretions are produced by the pineal gland. It was long believed that the melatonin could influence biological rhythms. That's totally false. The secretion of melatonin and the other two hormones, since they are all secreted simultaneously, always starts at 10 p.m. It's necessary for there to be no light, since light blocks secretion, and it lasts 8 hours, whatever the season.
So my night nurse, who works away at night under artificial light, her Valentonin is blocked, and she'll secrete it later when she goes to bed in the morning? How? By closing her eyes?
The suprachiasmatic nucleus will adapt the rhythm to the nurse's lifestyle, in fact. But it takes a while, because with a time shift, an hour to an hour and a half per day can be recovered. What's interesting is that it was long believed that since winter nights were longer, the secretion of melatonin was longer. So it was said that seasonal affective disorders are due to the longest secretion, to the amount of melatonin that was secreted longer and thus larger. While in reality, and we showed it in studies carried out in October, secretion, whatever the length of night and whatever the season, always takes place between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. for people with a normal lifestyle, not nurses who work at night.
That's it. And what's very interesting is to see that it's in a rather deep and thus very protected region of our brain. In other words, if one takes a blow on the head, glands as important as the pineal gland and even the pituitary gland are not likely to be damaged. And the pineal gland basically is above the pituitary gland. And it's what's going to regulate all that. You said that the three hormones were secreted simultaneously, meaning together. It's not one after the other?
Simultaneously, so between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., serotonin thus comes from tryptophan. It's not a metabolite. It could be thought that melatonin was a metabolite of serotonin, but that's false. The metabolites are elimination products. For example, noradrenaline comes from tyrosine, but there's a step that passes through dopamine. So at this moment it could be said that noradrenaline is a metabolite of dopamine. That's not it at all.
I understand.
So from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3 immediate enzymatic acetylations occur in a cascade, in a chain. First, the acetylation of serotonin to yield melatonin, which has a neuroprotective role, which protects neurons. Simultaneously, the acetylation of melatonin with cyclization to give 6-methoxyharmalan,
Which prepares for waking the next morning?
which is a powerful psychostimulant like LSD. And what's funny is that with the third acetylation, here simply by adding that to the nitrogen, a product that has opposite effect is produced, one that causes sleepiness, provides sleep and decreases alertness. And the actions of 6-methoxyharmalan and Valentonin on alertness, the heart and dopaminergic pathways are opposed, and this ligand, which is the difference between these two molecules, is this acetyl group called an allostergic ligand. This product will amplify the response of serotonergic, noradrenergic, and dopaminergic receptors by binding near the receptor without binding to it. And it will interact with this receptor via chemical bonds. It will deform it, and for serotonin receptors, increase the sensitivity of this receptor to serotonin, to noradrenaline for noradrenergic receptors, and to dopamine for dopaminergic receptors. And this specifically without touching the other extremely numerous serotonergic receptors, noradrenergic receptors, etc.
It's a kind of crossfade effect where basically one starts with tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin, and then it's simultaneously a crossfade that leads to the second hormone. But it's simultaneous, and then the third arrives as the second slows. And in the end, Valentonin decreases and waking appears by the second hormone?
Here's what occurs between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. According to the chain reaction we saw. The three hormones are secreted for 8 hours. For people with a normal lifestyle, bakers, nurses, etc., will rise on a different schedule. When the schedule is shifted, secretion will shift, and it will take 8 days to reset the schedule. And here one sees the secretion of melatonin, the secretion of Valentonin, and the secretion of 6-methoxyharmalan. It's seen to be much lower here, but for reasons of kinetics at the receptors, it's of the same order of magnitude. And nature is well designed because the pharmacokinetic properties of these two hormones are such that they are produced at the same time. This one has a very short half-life and a volume of distribution 10 times that of Valentonin. But this one has a much longer half-life, 38 minutes here, 150 minutes for 6-methoxyharmalan. It's a law of pharmacokinetics. Reaching the steady state is a function of the number of half-lives. The steady state is reached very quickly with this perfusion. The concentrations are in steady state when the rate of secretion is equal to the rate of elimination. The inputs are equal to the outputs. And with a short half-life, the steady state arrives quickly. 6-methoxyharmalan has a much longer half-life, and so the steady state is not reached even at 6 a.m. when secretion stops. But when secretion stops, Valentonin decreases very rapidly, and in a few minutes, 6-methoxyharmalan moves ahead and wakes people up. It maintains waking until 10 p.m. And the cycle is finished, and it starts again for 24 hours. Always after 10 p.m. It's the primum
There you are.
movens.
And when melatonin begins to drop, it becomes what? It passes in the urine? It disappears?
Melatonin is eliminated. Then the elimination processes, that's metabolism, it's essential. They're transformed into glycuro and sulfo-conjugated derivatives of hydroxymelatonin. And there's extremely fast extraction of these products, which are elimination metabolites.
When one says metabolite, it's an elimination.
It's an elimination.
I understand. I seem to recall that melatonin was given to airline pilots and cabin crew when they crossed meridians. Was it to help them to sleep? Since melatonin is not a sleep hormone, but a hormone that protects neurons from oxidation.
Indeed, it was thought up till now that only one hormone secreted by the pineal gland was known. The system was not known. It was thought that melatonin was responsible for biological rhythms, whereas in reality, the suprachiasmatic nuclei are the body's true biological clocks, and melatonin is only the hand of the clock.
Ah, not bad, the hand of the clock.
And, as was thought wrongly that melatonin regulated biological rhythms, it was said that by taking melatonin it was possible to regulate the problems of jet lag which one suffers during intercontinental flights.
That's it.
In reality, melatonin has no effect and provides no benefit. I believe people gave up on it. Nobody takes melatonin anymore, and airline pilots and cabin crew no longer take melatonin.
Okay, so, Jean-Bernard, melatonin is not the sleep hormone. It protects neurons from oxidation, from the risk of being damaged, and that's the basic mistake. It's not the sleep hormone, it's after that one must look.
In any case, since what happened next was not known, a chain of acetylations, a true biochemical cascade arising from serotonin, and only this hormone, melatonin, was known, so it was accorded all the qualities, the pharmacological properties it doesn't actually possess. The only important property of melatonin is that it's the most powerful reducer in biological environments known. Many studies have been carried out in vitro, by Reiter in particular. It was still the same team as Lerner and McIsaac.
In Cleveland.
Yes, he did much research in Cleveland and published several articles, and he showed that it was an extremely powerful reducer, the most powerful one known, superior to glutathione, ascorbic acid, etc. And we, with our in vivo mass spectrometry techniques, here we found in the brain 2-oxo-melatonin, which is the product of oxidation of melatonin. But when a reducer, a product like melatonin, reduces a compound, it's oxidized. It's the oxidation-reduction reaction, and that, the fact of having found 2-oxo-melatonin in a significant amount in the brain, is proof of the reducing properties of melatonin in vivo, such that melatonin traps free radicals and protects neurons from their destructive activity.
So it's logical to think that melatonin's the strongest protector, the strongest antioxidant. It's logical since what's most important in our bodies is our neurons. Even so. So it's extremely interesting to have shown that melatonin is not the sleep hormone, but rather a hormone that protects my neurons while I fall asleep from Valentonin.
There you have it. So in this system, each of the 3 hormones has its role. For alternating wake and sleep, And for regulating the organs of the autonomic and psychological states, it's 6-methoxyharmalan and Valentonin, which in the end are the hormones of thought and sleep, respectively. And that is the sleep hormone and the night hormone. They have opposite actions on the autonomic system. And melatonin, which is part of the cascade, its only role is neuroprotection, but it's extremely important.
Its only role is protection.
Neuroprotection.
Exactly. That means that when a pilot takes this melatonin, thinking that he'll sleep on the return trip, he'll not sleep better on the return, but nevertheless he protected his neurons
Absolutely.
to some degree. Is that
So
the
it
only
can only
benefit?
be beneficial to take melatonin.
Right. Exactly. And so melatonin, if it has to be taken,
Well, melatonin, first, if it's taken, it can be taken orally. It has very poor bioavailability. We studied it. Only 10% of the administered doses are bioavailable and penetrate the bloodstream, and thus can play a role. Of what is taken, only 10% will
so
protect
it's
neurons.
neutralized. Okay.
90% is not absorbed because there's a first hepatic pass effect. The drug is metabolized quickly during its first pass in the liver before arriving in the bloodstream.
The night.
It's what we call a first pass effect. But even so, it's administered orally. So if one wants to have sufficient concentrations in the body, enough has to be taken to have protection during the night. Since in the end, it will play its neuroprotective role while it's being secreted.
Yeah, that's it.
Because as of 6 a.m., it has a very short half-life, and in a few minutes, it's eliminated. So it will have to be taken at bedtime at night. Personally, I recommend taking a dose of 3 milligrams. It's amply sufficient. But it must be remembered that from the moment it's taken, every 38 minutes, the concentration decreases by half. Then it's secreted for 8 hours in constant perfusion. But after you give it in a peak, it drops and is eliminated. And so it will be necessary to protect the neurons throughout the night, like the pineal gland does.
In other words, during the night, our daily experiences are gently put in place because melatonin is protecting our neurons. So it's taken around 10 to 11 o'clock at night in a rather large dose, since only 10% crosses the intestinal barrier and is able to act.
Right. So melatonin, it should be taken at bedtime at night, an oral dose of 3 milligrams, and in particular by people with hypofunctioning of the pineal gland. So with a weak sleep-wake system to provide protection of their neurons.
It's not for pilots.
No. Well, that could be okay, but it can't be bad, but there's no benefit.
There's no benefit, that's it. The second hormone, 6-methoxyharmalan, has a quite complicated name.
6-methoxyharmalan thus has a tricyclic structure. This skeleton with the nitrogen atom is a beta-carboline, since this nitrogen is in possession beta of this first nitrogen. And this structure is encountered in alkaloids of harmala. Harmala, or Peganum harmala, is a plant containing several alkaloids that are drugs, that are hallucinogenic psychostimulants.
Yeah, that's it.
In the plant, we find harmaline and harmine.
Okay.
Note that 6-methoxyharmalan is an isomer of harmaline, because the 6-methoxy, instead of being at position 6 in this molecule, is at position 7. So that harmaline is 7-methoxyharmalan. And the change from position 6 to 7 makes the molecule 1/10 as psychostimulatory. And 6-methoxyharmalan has the same level of activity as LSD, but a different chemical structure. All the same, from the structure-activity relationship point of view, it's the same pharmacophore skeleton.
It's enough to change the position from 7 to 6, and the activity is multiplied.
That's very dangerous. There can be extraordinary surprises when small molecules are modified. And too, when COCH3 is added to this molecule, it becomes the sleep hormone.
Yes, so there are a considerable number of patients who complain of being unable to fall asleep, of not sleeping well. So they sleep, they don't sleep, they're missing something.
That's it.
And they'll be provided a treatment. Is that
That's it. Sleep disorders, some sleep disorders are primary. For example, people with low secretions of melatonin. Okay, that was demonstrated by a team of Israelis, by Chidinsky and etc., and Lavi's team as well. They showed that melatonin excretion in the urine, at sulfatoxy melatonin, decreased as degree of insomnia increased. It was very clear, and it's obvious that in these cases of primary insomnia, if there's no pineal secretion of melatonin, in the end it's a marker, there's no secretion of Valentonin, and no secretion of 6-methoxyharmalan as well. And if one wants to treat insomniacs, well, it would be necessary, in order to make them sleep, to give them some Valentonin or its synthetic derivatives. We made 569 of them. The deficit of this hormone will obviously be mitigated, but when they wake up, they won't have the waking hormone. A sleep disorder should be treated like a sleep-wake system disorder. The two hormones must be administered in proportions adequate to provide the harmonious regulation of the body. Because don't forget, Valentonin is more than just the sleep hormone. It's the hormone that regulates blood pressure, heart rate,
the autonomic system,
the dopaminergic, and, in my opinion, all the other glands. I'm persuaded that all the other glands function under the influence of the pineal body. We demonstrated experimentally that the sudden administration of 6-methoxyharmalan, there was an explosion of plasma cortisol. And it's known, for example, that in the bloodstream's curves, over 24 hours, the maximum level of Valentonin corresponds to the minimum level of cortisol, and the maximum level of 6-methoxyharmalan at 8 a.m. corresponds to the maximum level of cortisol at the same time.
Endocrinological revolution, basically.
Exactly.
With the pineal gland at the top, and then it's the pituitary gland, the testicles, the ovaries, the adrenals, etc. It's
personally,
fabulous.
I believe that the body is extremely complex, but since we are completely different during the day versus during the night, it's not possible to provide regulation of the body if there's no regulatory system to start with. And every part of the system,
and basically,
at 10 p.m.,
you penetrate the mystery
starts.
of human beings, because that had been mysterious until now. It's rather fabulous.
Well, this sleep-wake system is really one of the marvels of creation. When the pharmacokinetic mechanisms are studied, all the conditions needed, everything must be concordant.
And so in the fox, for example, which hunts at night and sleeps during the day, the cycle will be reversed?
Well, in foxes and in animals with diurnal sleep, like predators, lions, or even cats, there is always a secretion of melatonin, and of the system of 3 hormones between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. But the pharmacokinetics are reversed in such a way that at night there is a prevalence of 6-methoxyharmalan, and during the day there is a prevalence of the sleep hormone.
So one can imagine synthesizing Valentonin to give to patients in the rather near future.
It's very easy to synthesize. And when there is a drug, it will be a very inexpensive drug. They are. On this subject, of course, we synthesized. When I discovered Valentonin, I knew immediately that I had the sleep hormone. We confirmed it. We synthesized it very easily in a few days with some chemist friends. We tested it and we showed indeed that it was the sleep hormone. It provided physiological sleep, while the other hypnotic products on the market, such as Benzodiazepines and related drugs, Zolpidem, Stilnox, etc., cause anesthetic sleep, which is not at all restorative.
Yes, which leaves one tired, like the patients we operate on.
Which causes amnesia. Because we'll see that when electroencephalographic studies are carried out, one realizes that with these compounds, benzodiazepinic drugs in general, there's a collapse of REM paradoxical sleep, which is the sleep associated with memory. And physiological sleep, there is a lot of long, deep sleep, for the most part restorative sleep, whereas with benzodiazepines and related drugs, there is a majority of non-restorative light sleep.
In other words, sleep imposed by the drug, basically.
That's right. Moreover, when anesthetized after waking from anesthesia,
quite a hangover, right?
The fatigue lasts for several days.
Exactly.
And we've often forgotten what happened before.
Yes, exactly, yes. And so, basically, tryptophan is an essential amino acid, and it's very important to have it in our diet. I know there's a little of it in Bordeaux wines, but it's also in many other foods, which means that this entire biochemical chain, these various cascades, which are at once sequential and simultaneous, that's what enables us to understand exactly what's happening in terms of biochemistry and to use it in a drug.
Tryptophan is indeed one of the 20 essential amino acids. What's also interesting is that there are 2 amino acids that intervene in the synthesis of the hormones of the sleep-wake system. There's tryptophan, it's an essential amino acid. Serotonin is produced in the pineal gland. Because serotonin, it's said that it's a hormone. It can't be a hormone because a hormone must be able to circulate in the bloodstream. Yet these molecules, like serotonin, are hydrophilic polar molecules that can't circulate. That's why serotonin, which is necessary to the synthesis of melatonin and other hormones of the sleep-wake system, is produced in the pineal body, from tryptophan in situ, and in the same way in neurons. It is produced at the ends of neurons, always from in situ tryptophan. However, hormones such as melatonin, 6-methoxyharmalan, notice that when going from serotonin to melatonin, methylation is made here on the OH, which makes the molecule lipophilic, which enables it to circulate. And here is a molecule, a neurotransmitter like serotonin, for example, that becomes a hormone, because a hormone is a chemical substance secreted by a gland into the bloodstream that acts remotely by binding to receptors on organs and by determining metabolic effects or dynamic effects.
Okay, but I won't have any plasma serotonin.
No. And besides, it can't be assayed because as soon as serotonin is released into the body, it's immediately transformed into 5-hydroxyindoleacetic acid.
Right, yeah. Okay.
It's eliminated in the
That's how
urine,
it's assayed.
often as a glucurono-conjugated derivative. So this serotonin, it's like dopamine. It's said that dopamine is a hormone. That's impossible. Dopamine is produced in dopaminergic neurons from tyrosine, like noradrenaline is in noradrenergic neurons.
That's where one sees the complementarity between the analytical, the pharmacist, the chemist, and in the final analysis, the
And the
clinician.
pharmacophysiologist, exactly. So there you are. So getting back to tryptophan, it's interesting because 2 amino acids are not redundant. In other words, for which there's only one codon. There are 64 codons in the genetic code, and there are 2 amino acids, tryptophan and methionine, that are not redundant. It's amusing because these 2 amino acids intervene here. Tryptophan, because it enables the synthesis of serotonin, and methionine, because it's the basis of S-adenosylmethionine, which enables methylation of the OH here and to yield OCH3. Okay, it's a correlation, but it's an observation that appeared
Okay,
interesting
and when you
to me.
say not redundant, what does that mean precisely?
So redundancy is the ability of an amino acid to be conveyed by several codons. As there are 64 codons and 20 amino acids, tryptophan has only one codon,
There's only one.
the codon UGG, whereas the others can have 2 or 3 codons on average.
Yeah.
And it's said that the genetic code is degenerate because there are redundancies, and there are none for tryptophan and methionine.
Is it possible to assay melatonin in the blood in order to know whether it's really needed?
First, from a technical perspective, it can be assayed since we have techniques employing gas chromatography coupled to mass spectrometry. It's a very delicate technique, but we envisage, of course, to make the assay easier. We have developed an automatable method of coupling high-performance liquid chromatography to mass spectrometry, which practically allow the same sensitivities to be achieved.
Okay.
It's possible to assay 0.5 picogram of melatonin per milliliter of plasma. We intend to spread this technique to all medical bioanalytic labs, because as we just saw, melatonin in this biochemical cascade is a marker of other pineal hormones. If there is hyperfunctioning of the pineal gland, there will be a deficit of this melatonin, which will affect, there will be a deficit of all the pineal hormones. Conversely, in psychoses, there is likely an excess of 6-methoxyharmalan, the agent of psychoses, and it should correspond to an excess of melatonin.
Yeah.
So, by assaying melatonin in the blood, one can have a quantitative idea of the activity level of the sleep-wake system. In situations of deficit, which cause neurologic diseases such as sleep disorders, clinical depression and neurodegenerative diseases, it was seen that in Alzheimer's there was zero melatonin. So melatonin will be assayed. It will have to be assayed from 1 a.m. because, as can be seen by these graphs, for example, at 10 p.m. it starts, so at 1 a.m. melatonin is measured, and it's seen that around 1 a.m. the steady state is practically reached.
At the top, yes.
If we assay at 10 p.m. or at 11 p.m., there'll be very little. We'll have no idea, since it's at the steady state there, hence an idea. So here there are considerable differences between subjects. We're not equal, since it was seen that even in healthy volunteers, healthy young subjects and elderly subjects were enrolled, the steady states varied from 10 picograms per milliliter to 120 picograms per milliliter. And the funniest thing is that with age it dropped on average, but in our studies it was an elderly subject who had the minimum, but it was also an elderly subject who had the maximum. He had 120 picograms per milliliter. So we are unequal regarding the risks of having neurologic disturbances.
Are there?
We'll see it here.
Young and elderly subjects.
Here we have the studies of the kinetics of pineal secretions, which we carried out with mass spectrometry. Melatonin was sampled from each subject for 24 hours.
In the blood.
Right. We noticed that in the young or elderly patients, whatever the season, there it was in May, there it was in October, the length of the night there, exactly 8 hours, and there, 8 hours, whereas they were 13.5 hours of night. And we noticed that there were considerable variations in these healthy volunteer subjects. 25 years of age on average, it goes from 19 picograms per milliliter to 93.5 picograms per milliliter. And here, in elderly subjects, it's even worse, since there is a factor of 13. One sees that in elderly subjects, on average, the secretion of Valentonin drops with age. Although logically, it's logical that the minimum was found in an elderly subject, but the maximum, the high record,
Did he sleep more
was
than the
observed in a
others?
70-year-old subject.
Because all the blue points are subjects.
They are normal volunteers, and apparently none had sleep problems.
Okay, so normal people, right?
Normal people. They are healthy volunteers, so no sleep problems. So there's a factor of 13, therefore it can be imagined that there are factors that can range from 1 to 100 in subjects.
Basically, how do you differentiate awakening and waking?
Awakening is passing from the sleep state to the waking state. The sleep state occurs when alertness falls below a certain level, which can be described as the sleep barrier. Passing from the waking state to the sleep state. And awakening, it's passing from the sleep state to the waking state. During these two periods, one can think that it's the prevalence, when Valentonin is prevalent in the body at night, prevalent because its concentrations are higher than those of the waking hormone. Normally, this hormone maintains alertness below the sleep barrier. At the end of the night, at the end of the secretion, at 6 a.m., 6-methoxyharmalan concentrations become higher quickly. There's a prevalence of 6-methoxyharmalan that increases the level of alertness, and one passes from sleep to waking until 10 p.m.
At waking. So the key point is the sleep barrier.
That's right.
It's clear.
But notice that after, at 6 a.m., we have a lot of waking hormone, but in the evening we have almost none left. We're tired, we have no more energy.
Yeah, we need to sleep.
Right. So the problem is that when one doesn't sleep, of course, one is not restored, the body is not refreshed. But when one doesn't sleep, one doesn't produce the waking hormone.
Yes.
And during the day, one is even more tired than normal because the waking hormone was not produced the night before.
So restorative sleep, these two words really go together.
That's right. Perfectly. Physiological and restorative sleep.
Absolutely. Basically, tryptophan is an extremely important amino acid, since it's from it that serotonin will begin to be formed. And then?
Indeed. Tryptophan is one of the 20 amino acids. It's an essential amino acid, and it's the precursor of serotonin. Not only in the pineal gland, serotonin is produced, is formed from tryptophan following two enzymatic reactions. And then serotonin will yield, after 3 successive acetylations, these 3 sleep-wake system hormones, which constitute the biochemical cascade about which we've spoken. And tryptophan is also the precursor of serotonin in the serotonergic neurons.
Close to the junction between neurons, is that it?
Exactly. It can't circulate in the body, so it's produced in situ in the pineal gland and neurons here, where it acts as a neurotransmitter.
And dopamine is located where in this vast hormonal system?
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter of dopaminergic neurons. The activation or blocking of dopamine receptors leads to muscle relaxation by activation. That's how Valentonin causes muscle relaxation at night. And the antagonism of dopamine receptors by blocking 6-methoxyharmalan during the day is responsible for increased muscle contraction.
So, we're tense when awake, indeed the muscles function, and during sleep we become more relaxed, and at the same time we have lower
complete
blood
muscle
pressure.
relaxation. That's right. It was thought that dopamine was the agent of psychoses, which is an error due to the interpretation of the action of the effectiveness of chlorpromazine, largactil, in psychoses.
That's it.
This product was discovered by chance.
By laboratory.
It's a lucky find, in fact. The physical straitjacket was in fact replaced with a chemical straitjacket, making real zombies of people. And since largactil had, in animal pharmacology, an anti-dopaminergic action, it was thought that the psychoses were due to an excess of dopamine. In fact, it's completely the opposite, since we know that 6-methoxyharmalan is the agent of psychoses, and actually, largactil also has anti-noradrenergic properties that prevent the synthesis of the surplus sleep-wake system in psychotics, resulting from the actions of largactil.
Basically, with this discovery, many drugs prescribed by psychiatrists will be abandoned, and so benzodiazepines, sleeping pills, anxiolytics and antidepressants, all that's going to change a lot.
Yes, what will change the most, in my opinion, are benzodiazepines used as anxiolytics and as hypnotics. I think that when we know that benzodiazepines were discovered by chance, following a false reaction in the chemistry of dyes derived from quinazoline, which led by chance by a false reaction to librium, and it was tested for professional purpose in the rat, and it exhibited anxiolytic properties. Following that, there was the entire development of benzodiazepines, with diazepam, and then, for reasons of patent protection, circumventions of chemical structure, related drugs were discovered such as zolpidem, Stilnox, which is currently the leading hypnotic. But not only Stilnox is used, which was put on the market as a hypnotic, but Lexomil is often used. All these products, all these benzodiazepines taken by insomniacs. In reality, these products cause anesthetic sleep, which is not at all restorative, which fatigues the body and which has amnesia-causing effects.
Memory loss.
In particular, signs of anterograde amnesia, loss of memory of recent events. And in the end, these drugs do more harm than good. In my opinion, they should be withdrawn, perhaps kept in anesthesiology, in pre-anesthesia, but withdraw them. When one looks in the Vidal drug dictionary, at the secondary properties, the properties used in therapeutics according to Vidal, it's surprising. For example, any one, zolpidem, diazepam, Valium, There are 4 extremely dense pages, and there are 2 lines for the pharmacological properties used. And there are the so-called paradoxical side effects, which are side effects, undesirable effects. Paradoxical because their cause can't be explained. And in this diagram, I represented a little bit, thanks to the discovery of the sleep-wake system, the cause of the paradoxical effects of benzodiazepines, which can now be explained. So it's long been known that the anxiolytic effect of benzodiazepines is due to their GABAergic action on GABAergic neurons. One sees, in fact, that benzodiazepines have an allosteric action on the receptors of GABAergic neurons. They deform GABAergic receptors and make them more sensitive to GABA, their neurotransmitter. In other words, they amplify the signal, and under these conditions they decrease alertness. But they also have troublesome side effects because here too they decrease muscle contraction. They cause a muscle reaction with the elderly have problems of muscle weakness, which is why they fall.
And break their hips.
Broken hips.
They feed orthopedists.
It's true, and all the geriatricians complain about these harmful effects of benzodiazepines. And these paradoxical effects that oppose the anxiolytic action of products, they are due to the presence in these benzodiazepine molecules of the pharmacophore skeleton. In other words, bearing the pharmacological properties of 6-methoxyharmalan. In other words, of LSD, in a manner of speaking. So these GABAergic molecules, they have LSD in their structure. They are 5-HT2C receptor antagonists that act like 6-methoxyharmalan. Like the waking hormone, they are anti-sleep drugs. These products cause anesthetic sleep, which is not restorative, amnesia-causing, and moreover, if some bit of physiological sleep remained, it is destroyed by this anti-physiological sleep action, which is its opposite. It's the cause of the undesirable paradoxical effects, and is perfectly explained in the context of the structure-activity relationship that one sees, as benzodiazepinic molecules contain the chemical signature of 6-methoxyharmalan.
But so here we're at the junction between 2 neurons. That's an illustration of a synapse.
Yes, a synapse of GABAergic receptors that is known, that produces. But what wasn't known, what wasn't understood, was the origin of the paradoxical effects, because paradoxical is opposite the desired effect, and it isn't explained. For example, when one looks at all these products in Vidal, for a hypnotic such as zolpidem, Stilnox, when the paradoxical effects are examined, the most significant undesirable effects, the first line, the first 2 citations, for a hypnotic, a so-called hypnotic drug, the most significant side effect is insomnia. And the second effect for anxiolytics is severe anxiety.
Even risk of suicide is written. Basically, one sees in the clinic many patients who have sleep problems, who have neurological problems, who go to the psychologist, to the psychiatrist, and they should be offered something. In what form? Will it be a tablet, a patch? How do you see treatments of tomorrow that regulate this sleep-wake system?
What's envisaged is a hormone replacement therapy for dysfunctions of the sleep-wake system. These dysfunctions could be a quantitative deficit of the 3 hormones, the cascade, in fact. And under these conditions, it will be necessary to administer the hormones and melatonin. So melatonin can be taken orally, but the 2 other hormones can't.
They'll be destroyed in the digestive tract.
So one could combine a synthetic valentinergic, one of the 569 molecules that I synthesized, and that can be administered orally, with 6-methoxyharmalan, which can be absorbed orally. Unfortunately, though, their pharmacokinetic properties don't correspond at all, which in no way lends itself to a combination with 6-methoxyharmalan, so that to harmoniously regulate the sleep-wake cycle for the psychological and autonomic states, and to ensure the prevalences at specific times, between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., and between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., the alternation of the two hormones, the prevalence of the two hormones, one is obliged to administer the combination of Valentonin and 6-methoxyharmalan. Why administer the combination too? Because when one has a sleep disorder due to a deficit of Valentonin, one inevitably has a deficit of melatonin and a deficit of the three members of the cascade.
The other.
So it's necessary to administer, to provide harmonious regulation of the body for 24 hours, it's necessary to administer this combination. Since it's necessary, for reasons of kinetics, to associate Valentonin with 6-methoxyharmalan, and since it cannot be administered orally, the product will be administered in a patch. And today, dual reservoir patches exist. In fact, the two hormones will be given in a proportion of 4:1, with 4 times more Valentonin than 6-methoxyharmalan, to provide the prevalences the body needs.
Yes, since one's trying to regulate sleep, it's logical.
Right. And in cases of deficit of the endocrine function of the pineal gland, for most diseases, sleep disorders, clinical depression, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, etc., the patch will be applied at bedtime at night, while lying down, and it will be removed upon waking in the morning. Furthermore, that means that it will be very good for jet lag. One arrives in a country and expects jet lag, or wants to sleep, one applies the patch, one takes it off in the morning, and one suffers no jet lag at all. Now, for diseases such as psychosis, where there is an excess of melatonin and a quantitative excess of the sleep-wake system, the secretion of Valentonin obviously can't be stopped, slowed. So these subjects sleep very well at night. They sleep very well because they have lots of sleep hormone. But when they wake up in the morning, when Valentonin is eliminated, they have abnormal levels. They have hallucinations, and so on. Until now, in the end, they're bludgeoned with neuroleptics because neuroleptics have non-specific antidopaminergic actions.
Yeah.
Because these hormones have specific actions on certain receptors, but not on others. And then, these hormones, they'll be given at night, for 24 hours at the moment when the pineal gland is functioning. In other words, for 8 hours.
That's its replacement.
From 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., the pineal gland, it's done its work.
Yes,
it starts again at 10 p.m.
So it's a hormone replacement therapy insofar as the pineal gland functions insufficiently in certain people.
It's as if one applies a pineal gland in patch form.
Exactly.
And in the case of psychoses, since the system can't be decreased, well, there's too much Valentonin, one sleeps. It's not troublesome. But there's too much 6-MH. One will administer a single reservoir patch loaded with Valentonin. This Valentonin will displace excess 6-MH from the receptor on the basis of receptor competition, and the receptor returns to normal functioning.
I understand.
It should work without the least side effects.
So this is a treatment for serious neuropsychiatric pathologies.
I think it will change the lives of psychotic patients.
Basically, Jean-Bernard Fourtillan, this discovery will change in an extremely significant way our view of all these neurological and neuropsychiatric pathologies that touch the problem of sleep, that touch the problem of Parkinson's, neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, and even certain pathologies that can occur in the context of an imbalanced autonomic system with blood pressure rising or dropping in an excessive manner. At the same time, we're in the process of understanding, by this discovery, which is a genuine scientific bombshell, that the pineal gland is the leader of glands. It has been said that the pituitary gland is very important, but the pineal gland is above. It takes priority, the leader of glands. I like that expression. And it clearly shows that medical students, doctors, will finally be able to understand the functioning of these pathologies and to offer patients extremely simple treatments, a patch at bedtime, insofar as there will be too large a decrease, sleep disorders, etc. It's really a revolution that's coming. Thanks to this discovery in a chemistry laboratory in Poitiers by a professor of pharmacy and of medical chemistry, who is at the same time fully knowledgeable about pharmacokinetics. And it's easy to see why this discovery could not be made, I would say, by an average researcher in a research lab. So it's really a revolution, a scientific bombshell that's absolutely extraordinary and that gives us basically a response to certain mysteries of the functioning of humans in terms of sleep-wake regulation. And that will enable us to save a great many people, perhaps including people who are in extremely profound states of depression, who can even have suicidal ideas. Well, it will be possible to regulate all of that biologically. Our sleep-wake clock will finally, because it's understood, be regulated.